They are a group of women that believe we've been commanded to go into all the world, not just the places we feel comfortable. With that in mind, they are taking a message of love to women engaged in the adult entertainment industries. But they are not your typical church ladies. They are lace warriors, and this is their battle cry.
Hi, I'm Jazz James, founder of Lace Warriors. In today's episode, we'll explore a subject that often remains in the shadows, the stigmatization of women in the sex industry. So join us as Leanne, Karen, and I discuss the complexities and misconceptions surrounding this sensitive topic. So Karen, can you tell us about a time when you experienced an entertainer being stigmatized because of her profession?
Yes, so I actually want to share about two different situations where I witnessed that. One was inside the club and the other one was outside the club. And so the first one, I'm going to start with people outside of the club that have this misconception of, just assuming that all strippers are equal to maybe prostitutes or, sinners having an ugly life, not being responsible for their families. Mm-hmm. And that is not true. I do care for their families. A lot of them are moms. They are women. They have worth. And that is something that I believe we have to change in society and just see them as persons, are as people, children of God, just like any of us. And so that's the first one that I saw many times outside the church when people find out that I'm sharing the gospel with strippers. That's the first reaction that I get. And the other one was a little bit more painful because it was inside the club. And this happened, I think, a couple of months ago. Me and Jamie were given the gifts to the girls, and it's usually pretty easy. It's not, we don't experience a lot of harsh situations usually. But this time was a little different because for some reason there were a lot of clients, and we saw the ladies being mistreated a lot. And we saw how men just felt the right to do it. And, maybe make fun of them or treat them, touch them in different ways. And they just felt the right to do it because they're strippers, right? That's what they're there mm-hmm. for. And so we felt so bad after that night. And I even came back home with my heart crushed to see how they were treating them and how much these girls have to put up with because they need the money. So it's just heartbreaking to see that and how we assume that strippers have less worth than other women. And that is painful to watch inside and outside the club. So that's what I've experienced so far.
And what about you, Leanne? Have you seen women being stigmatized in some way?
Absolutely. Obviously, sexuality is a gift from God. It was created to be a positive experience, but God did give us boundaries, right? And those boundaries were meant to be between a husband and a wife. And so I think, when people look at strippers and the work that they do and how they express themselves sexually inside of a strip club, they look at that automatically as going outside the boundaries that God created for us and, committing willful sin. And I think it's real easy for Christians to, for people to judge them and, just kind of shun them because of their work. But I think that Karen really hit it on the head when she said, a lot of those women, they don't have, they don't necessarily feel like they have a choice. And at the end of the day, they're women that deserve respect and they deserve love. And they're not the enemy. We're called to reach God's people no matter where they are in the world, and that includes the strip club, especially the strip club.
Do you think it would make a difference in people's minds if they knew that a lot of these women actually have a day job? There's teachers, there's medical professionals, there's, secretaries, they have legitimate day jobs a lot of times. They do this at night to, maybe they need to buy a new car or they just need some other finances. And this is a way to do it. Do you think that would make a difference?
That might make some people more judgmental, like, well, why can't you get another regular job if you're having trouble making ends meet? I mean, it really just depends on the person and the perspective. Like, I think there's a lot of generalizations, like just about, women that work in strip clubs, like Karen mentioned earlier, that they're easy, or that, they come from, really, really horrible, home life situations, or they're all addicts or whatever. And that isn't the case. Like, I've literally stood at the bar and talked with, one of the ladies that we serve about her financial situations. And she's an older lady. She's in her 50s and she's divorced and she doesn't get alimony and she's putting herself through school. And it is literally, like, in this economy, like, that is the only way that she can survive financially, is by being a bar girl and a exotic club. So, I just think that people, aren't always educated, I guess, as to, why the women are there. Everybody has their own unique experience that brings them into that industry.
So male strippers are not stigmatized the same way female strippers are. Male strippers are seen as studs, Karen, what are your thoughts on that? Why are men not stigmatized the way women are?
That I have no idea. I wish I knew, because it's not fair. I mean, they're both doing pretty much the exact same thing, but somehow we come to a society that sees it wrong, coming from a girl, coming from a woman. And so I don't know why exactly is that, but it's painful to watch as well, because it's like we are so harsh on women in many aspects, not just this, but it feels like we have an extra burden in the society to fit certain standards. And so but yes, like the question that you asked before, a lot of these ladies, they have a day job. They are teachers. They are, they work in a gym as trainers. They're just do different things. And I always tell people, you see these ladies all the time. You just don't know what they do at night. Like, they're regular people. You wouldn't guess, like, ever. So and it's so hard to see how they treat them in a different way, just because the way they dress or the way they act in certain things or certain places. And so that, to me, it's really sad, because we should treat them the same way, even if they're dressed nicely, in a nice restaurant or in a strip club. I mean, we should be able to treat them the same, but it's not. And so, I do believe it's a little bit more hard for women than men in this industry, for sure.
What about in Texas? Men, the customers are not allowed to touch the women. We have no touch clubs. So, but yet, SA is very pervasive within our clubs. It's not uncommon for a woman to be groped or just outright assaulted in that way. Why do you feel like the men have the right to break this law, essentially, and touch these women, or even more, to do other things, and they don't seem to be bothered by it? They think, oh, they're getting something for free. She did a private dance and I did this. Why do you think they feel like they have that right? What are your thoughts, Leanne?
Probably, I mean, because of the environment, that I think just the environment in general, like, makes them feel like they have a right. Like, they feel like if a woman, is doing that kind of work, then, maybe she's, maybe they feel like she's asking for it, or, if she is willing to, expose her body, then it's okay. That somehow gives them permission, when it doesn't. It doesn't. But, unfortunately, that's just the kind of world that we live in.
I do believe they feel they're right because they're paying for it. I mean, they're not paying for being able to touch them, but they're paying to being able to see them and be with them, so they assume it's okay to go a little farther. And plus, a lot of these guys are already drunk, maybe on drugs, so that makes it even harder for them to. I mean, come on, it's a temptation. So they're right there, so they just feel the right to do it, and that's actually what we saw that night. We saw a lot of these guys just going a little farther, and even the ladies, you could tell in their faces they were not okay with it. They were not okay with it. And yes, it's their job to dance and do these things. But again, they are not prostitutes. And so a lot of people don't see that difference. And they assume they are, but they're not. And so it's so hard to watch, because we did last time and it was so hard to watch.
Well, and so how do you think this affects them as they go through the week, the month? They work in the club and they're assaulted, they're touched, they're stigmatized, they're talked down to. How do you think they feel the next day when they wake up? What kind of effect will that have on them going forward? Or is that just part of the job and they just blow it off?
I believe a lot of these girls actually use drugs and all of that for that reason, because they don't want to remember the next day what happened during their job. And so that's one of the reasons why they do that. But I do believe some of them do this job because they were mistreated in the past, maybe when they were little girls or in their youth. And so they're used to that. They're used to being mistreated by men. And so they're like, okay, let me just do that. I mean, I've always been this way. They've always treated me like that. I might as well continue doing that and get some money, while they do that. And so it's something that I've heard a lot. And, the research that I've done. And I don't know, I think you never get completely used to that. You just think it's normal. And they just go with it. But it makes it really hard then for them to understand their value before God's eyes, because they're being mistreated all the time by men. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it becomes really hard for them to see God, as a loving Father, because they do not see that from the other men around them.
Yes. Well, and I feel like it would be really hard to have a positive concept of who Christ is, a male, when you're confronted by these actions from other men all the time. I just feel like that it's a barrier that they have to cross somehow, and I don't know how they do that. I mean, more power to them, the ones that do. It has to just be divine. I don't know that it could be anything else but divine. What are your thoughts, Leanne?
I agree with everything that y'all said. I think that when you're in that kind of environment, the longer you stay in that environment, you desensitize to certain things. Mm-hmm. Well, this person, it happened to them. They just blew it off, got their money, go on. It is what it is. And you just become, I think it's really easy in that situation to, the longer you stay, to become desensitized to those things.
Mm-hmm. I read an article not too long ago about a woman who claimed that just in the past month alone, she had suffered 3 instances of SA. And I just thought, oh my gosh, can you imagine 3 instances in 1 month? And this was not just touching, this was full on.
Yeah.
So how does somebody even do that? How do you go back the next day 3 times in 1 month? I just think that would be incredibly difficult, and it has to just damage your self-worth. Your whole psyche has to suffer from that. I don't know how you, without the intervention of God, I don't know how you overcome that.
Introducing Strip Tees, with t-shirt designs that will make you stand apart from the rest. In a world that challenges norms and calls for boldness, you must express your faith boldly to be heard above all the noise. At Strip Tees, we fuse faith with fashion, creating designs that turn heads and spark conversations. We are commanded to go into all the world. Please wear a shirt when you do.
I feel like the club that I go into, mainly we were going into another club for a while, but recently that club did shut down temporarily. But I feel like the one that we have went into for the last few years, for the most part, I feel like management is really pretty good about protecting the women. But you just, for me to say that doesn't go on would be very, very naive, because I mean, it does. I mean, there's only 2 or 3 managers there at the most, any given time. So a lot of times, the door, there's not even a bouncer at one of these clubs that I go to, and so there's a door lady, this is on the counter, and so I think it would be very, very naive for me to think that things like that don't happen, no matter how good the management is. We have a really good relationship with the management there, and you can tell that they really do care a lot about the ladies that work there. The ladies have stayed there, a lot of them, for a really long time, but I'm sure there a lot goes on that goes unseen.
Yeah. I know at the club that I visit, the owner's female, and she's a former dancer. And I think that makes a huge difference, because she's been there. She's lived that life. She knows what it's like. But it was also a very long time ago. And things have changed a lot over the years as well. I think people are more bold about what they do and what they say to other people now than they were even 5 or 10 years ago. But they also have a healthy amount of floor staff, and that patrol and keep an eye out and protect the women. And still things happen. You just can't be everywhere all the time. But guess what happens when the women tell the men to stop? Well, the woman gets called names because she's not going along with it, and the women in the club actually have the right to walk away from a private dance if they don't feel safe. And I think that's amazing that the owner lets them do that. But then the woman gets stigmatized in a different way. She gets called a lot of names. It's just very difficult. I can't personally imagine how these women have the fortitude to do this job. The things that they confront in a night are just incredible. Sometimes they'll be on stage and the men are just mean, and they'll tell them, they're fat, they're ugly, you need to get off and let somebody else get on. And none of these women are ugly. None of them are fat. Some may be a little chunkier than others, but that's just people. I just can't imagine how these women have the guts to get up there in front of some of these men and dance. You're just putting yourself on display. And I'm not even talking about, anything negative or sinning or anything like that. I'm talking about you're getting up there and putting yourself on display for people that are just criticizing you and telling you how bad you are and how ugly you are, and what it must take for these women every day to have to face themselves after being called ugly and fat and everything else. And why do these men think that's okay?
And again, that's why I believe they're not there just because, just because they want to, just because they enjoy it, because they do, go through a lot of things during the night. And at least us, we are there at the beginning of the night, which is still calm. There's not a lot of clients most of the time. But as the night gets, later in the night, I believe they struggle with a lot of things, because the clients are getting drunker and there's more people coming in and less managers maybe. And so they go through a lot. And what makes them come back? Well, that's the need. That's the need that they have. And I've heard some people saying that, yes, they are doing this so that they can pay their student loans. There's people there because they have medical bills. Yes, the last episode, I think we heard about this mom who had the funeral for her baby. And so she had to work because she had to pay the funeral for her baby. And so it's not just because they want to, it's really a need. And it's just, my heart breaks for them, because yes, we all wish they were not there. We all wish they had a better job, but that's not the possibility for all of them.
Mm-hmm. I was at the club in my city one time, and I was out in the smoking area, and we were actually giving away lighters that night that said Jesus loves strippers on them. And the women were really excited. And so I was actually, we never give gifts to the men. We don't interact with the men or anything. But I sat one down on a table where a man was, and just thought, I'll just do it because, I'm a nice person. And we were out in the smoking area. And he picked it up and he read it and he said, no, he doesn't. She's a stripper. And I just thought, well, why do you think a stripper is not worth God's love? She's still a person. She's still a woman. And I think that a lot of what we've been talking about boils down to that. And sometimes they don't see them as women. They're objects. They've bought them. Mm-hmm. And they feel like they have the right to do what they want to with them. What are your thoughts, Karen?
Well, we see that all the time, even with women that are not strippers, that are being treated as objects. And so it's even worse when it comes to strippers, because they are in the industry and they are working.
Men and women are judgmental of the stripping industry, the adult entertainment industry. They're judgmental of the people in the industry, the women. And I have my thoughts, but what are your thoughts? Are women or men more judgmental?
I think probably women are more judgmental than men, for sure. And I think that's because women would just, I think they would be insecure about, what type, well, first of all, with their husbands, or boyfriends. And I think that I've known lots of couples that in the beginning of the relationship, thought it was okay to take their girlfriend, and went as a couple to the club and, planted, that insecurity, and just women have experienced, right? I think every woman has at some point in her life experienced having being in an unfaithful relationship, right? And so there's these insecurities there. And so I think naturally, women are just probably going to be more judgmental because of those insecurities.
Yes, I do agree with Leanne. I think women are more judgmental towards women. And again, not just strippers. It's just how it is. And it's sad. And we're trying to change that as well, because we're supposed to support each other, and nowadays with everything that's going on against women, we're trying to come together and fight for each other and support each other. And it's sad to see when it's the opposite, when we're trying to, just hit the other person instead of supporting her. And so, yes, I do agree with Leanne. In my opinion, it's women, sadly.
Mm-hmm. When I speak at churches especially, but when I speak anywhere, and I see that there's usually a group of older judgmental women, and I see them scowling and making faces while I'm talking and that sort of thing. And sometimes I'll just stop and I'll say, so where do you draw the line? What would you not do to feed your children? It came to a point where you had to strip or prostitute or not feed your children. Which would you do? Would you do what you had to do to feed your kids? Or would you just say, sorry, you don't get to eat tonight or tomorrow or the next day? And it's an extreme example, but it gets people thinking, because a lot of these women, that's what at least they believe their option is. Whether that's all the options they have or not, that's their perception. For whatever reason, this works for them, or I don't think they would all do it. Some would anyway, but I don't think all of them would. But my experience has been a lot of them will do whatever it takes for their families, for their kids. They because of the high price of childcare, you can't just run out and get a minimum wage job and pay for childcare. You just can't. It's not going to happen. And sometimes you can get assistance for childcare, but those waiting lists are very, very long. They're extremely long. And, it's not realistic to think that that's going to happen. They end up working 2 or 3 jobs, then they're never home with their kids at all. So this works for them because they get to work nights, and then a family member, a spouse, or whoever can take care of those kids, and they get to work, and they make incredible money. And they only have to work a few nights a week. They don't have to work all week like you do a regular 9-to-5 job.
It's not just about feeding their kids, but preventing from someone else to take them away from them, because if you don't feed them, if you don't give them what they need, they're going to take them away from you. So it's that fear comes in which I'll do whatever it takes so that I can keep my kids at home with me, not on the bridge. And so, yes, it's way more than we see on the surface in this topic. And we just need to look deeper and ask the questions and do some research so that we can understand why they do what they do.
If as a Christian community, we don't want women stripping, then what are we going to do? How are we going to help them come out of that? If they want to come out of it, how are we going to help? Because really it's on the church. It's on the Christian community. We can't sit and complain and not do anything. My heart really goes out to the women in the clubs. I feel like they're in a no-win situation a lot of times. They can't please, the saying is you can't please everybody. Well, sometimes you can't please anybody. And so you just do what you have to do, and you just deal with it. You deal with what comes with it.
I just want to say, Andrew, I'm glad that we talked about this tonight, and just the stigmas and stuff. Since being volunteering with this ministry, I've started on different social media platforms such as TikTok, whatever. I follow strippers, right? Like there's a thing on TikTok called Stripper Talk, and it's just like a strip talk. Excuse me, I can't talk. But I'm always just blown away by a lot of these women that I follow. They're nurses. Like you mentioned earlier, Karen, they're nurses or they're teachers. And the amount of backlash that they get, I cannot tell you the number of times. I've seen one of them on a social media platform just crying because society, or their coworkers have shunned them and, caused them to like lose their job and whatever. And it just, so talk about.
Well, and if we compare this with some other outreach ministries, like homeless, for example, I hear the same thing from so many people. They're homeless because they want to. They can get a job. They can do something. But we don't know their background. It's the same. At least here in this area, it is so expensive to get a 1-bedroom apartment. It is so expensive. And then how are you going to get a job if you don't have an address? And so it's just a chain of problems, trials after trials, for you to be able to, sustain a home. And so the same thing applies to strippers. They're just not living on the streets. They're trying something else. Yes, people don't like that, but that's what they're trying to do to survive. And so how are we going to help them? How are we going to support them so that they get out if they want to, if they need to? Then how are we going to help them? Are we going to go with them and apply for a job, which I think Jess has done that before, taking them to different jobs and apply, giving them a ride if they need it because they don't have a car. It comes to a lot of trials that if we try to adopt one of them to go through all of this process, we can find out that it's exhausting and it takes a lot of time and money and effort to be able to accomplish that. And so it's the same with each of them. They all have different stories for sure, but they all struggle at some point.
Right. And it even, one time I had the resume because I had just helped her type up a resume. I had the resume of an entertainer, and I was at lunch with a friend and I saw that this restaurant had a help wanted sign in the window. And I said, oh, well, here, let me leave you this resume. And she saw on there where this person had worked. And she said, okay, thanks. And then she went and threw it in the trash. And so we can't say that we don't want them in adult entertainment if we're not willing to help pull them out of it. Yes. We can't talk out of both sides of our mouth. And I feel like that's what, as a Christian community, I feel like that's what we do. We're either supportive of them in the clubs or we're supportive helping them get out of the clubs.
Yeah, and even the Bible mentions something like that when, someone knocks at the door and asks for food, or a place to sleep, and the person in the house says, "Oh, I'm just gonna pray for you," but doesn't give them any food, any clothes, nothing. And sometimes we do that. We judge, we say, "You should get out," or "I'm gonna be praying for you." Yes, prayer is good, but actions is what we need as well, not just the prayers.
Yes.
So we need money,
Yes.
we need volunteers, we need people willing to help. And so if we are gonna speak against someone, then we better go dig deeper and do something about it to help them and see how hard it is.
Right.
It's not easy to do that.
No, it's definitely not easy.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Battle Cry. If you've been moved by today's discussion, we encourage you to find ways to support organizations dedicated to offering support to individuals in the sex industry. You can check the show notes for some resources. Thank you once again for tuning in. Oh, and please share this podcast so others can enjoy it as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
You can warrior up with your own Christian apparel at officialstriptease.com. Connect with us at battlecrypodcast.com or on all the usual social media outlets. Thanks for watching Battle Cry. And remember, wars are not fought in the barracks, so warrior up and let's hear your battle cry.